Turned 10:30, so we need to crack on and make a start. Thank you everybody for attending this morning's Q&A session with the Mayor on combined authority policy. And it's good to see that we are most definitely coordinated. Just a couple of comments. If people can use their microphones when they speak, please. And also please note that the meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded on YouTube later. So first of all, apologies for absence, Lindsay.
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from Amanda Tomlinson and also Councillor Lauren Rainbow, and we have Councillor Barker here on her behalf.
Yeah. Just to say thank you for the invitation to be here as an observer and to learn how it's done.
Not sure that's going to work.
In the near future with Councillor Bird. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It won't be quite the same, John, if it's Councillor Bird rather than me, I hate to tell you.
I know Mike very well.
He's my leader, so I'll do as well.
Okay, we can move on into declarations of interest. Do I have any declarations of interest as laid down in the agenda? None from anybody? Super. So just before we move on to the Mayor's opening statement, as usual, we have a set of policy guidelines and some questions to put to the Mayor. They are only a guide. Please feel free to jump in and ask anything that you want to ask during the relevant section. And this time we had tried to engage members of the public. Lindsay had really helpfully tweeted out to see if they would like to put any questions forward, which would have come by myself to you. We've only had two, and those were two Friends of the Earth questions, which will be taken under the green policy agenda item. So with that, I will move on to the Mayor's opening statement and welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I will keep this very brief because the fun of this on both sides is always the Q&A. So it's just a few reflections. The first thing I want to say, this is a strange thing to say, but it's a big thank you to you and to this the scrutiny part of the organisation. And the reason I say that is that perhaps the most significant thing to have happened in the last period since we last met has, of course, been the devolution deal negotiation agreement and then obviously ratification last week. And I think if you stand back from the individual elements in it, and I'm sure there'll be questions on some of them, the underlying point is one of trust. So that the government has actually said to us, and to Greater Manchester, to be fair, we trust how this organisation is run, structured, led and what it does. And that's the reason it has been prepared to devolve considerable cash and indeed some additional powers. And one of the elements that they have looked at is the way in which the governance of the organisation works. And it's been, it's 6 years since we were set up, not long, as the Lord Mayor of Coventry always reminds me, they've been Lord Mayors of Coventry for 782 years. So we are but an infant. But there is a really important point about the progress that we've made over that period to get that trust. And I'm sure there are not people sitting on the top of the number 9 bus today saying, brilliant, the combined authorities done a devolution deal. But there is actually substantial stuff that will affect the region in due course. But I think there's just a moment of reflection to say, actually, the governance part of the organisation, which this is a part, indeed, Mark's committee as ARAC, it's all relevant to building that trust. So thank you. The most important thing that has happened has, of course, been the devolution deal, as I say, but I'm not going to go into the contents of it. You all know, you can quiz me on that. But then I think it's probably worth saying as well, there are some areas where I know I'm going to be quizzed, where the issue of a little bit of difference between my view and indeed, I hope this is a better reflection, the view of the combined authority, because when I have had a few little run-ins recently with central government, I have always known that we've done it on the back of a combined authority board decision to give authority to the position that we've taken. But I'm sure there'll be a few questions actually about those areas, and particularly net zero, where I hope when we come to it, I hope colleagues will feel that we are making real steady progress across all of the different headings. And I personally have very much staked my leadership on continuing to do that. And then it's probably worth just reflecting the fact that, and I'm sure we'll have questions from knowing what's coming on, but questions across lots of delivery areas, that it's not perfect. We're behind the curve on some of our pieces, but fundamentally, the things that we said we would do in the annual plan, we are getting on doing. And you will pick away at those, but I stand back and look at the big picture. That is exactly what we are doing. And although it's not the main subject today, there will be a separate discussion over finances as we run towards the budget setting. It is also true that the financial reports that have gone to the board, both about last year, we closed within a few £1 million of our estimate, indeed on the right side of that, and this year looks as though we're going to be able to land in exactly the right place as well. And obviously that financial certainty behind us is really important to enable us to carry out all those programmes confidently. So I'm actually pleased about the position we're in there. We know, and this will come out in the discussion over the budget, we know we've got a big challenge going forward in terms of the subsidy of the public transport network. But as you know, one of the other good things that has happened in the last few weeks is we have settled our deal with National Express to protect the network at least until the end of next year. And actually, if one compares us with other regions of the country, we're actually in a really good position there. But John's committee will correctly scrutinise that in due course. But it is a really important thing for the region. So I wanted just to spend a second on it now. But that's all I need to say by way of introduction, Kathy.
Thanks very much for that. And yeah, we do have a number of questions that will come around the devolution deal and the single settlement. So if we kick off then, the first question I'm going to put to you, Mayor, is around the transfer of West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner functions.
Yes.
Now, at previous meetings, you have said that you wouldn't actively seek or aggressively seek the powers to assume the Police and Crime Commissioner role. But obviously, we know that the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill changes that and gives all mayors the power to do so. So could you explain your current position and what do you expect to happen over the coming months, please?
Yeah, with pleasure. So let's just make sure we understand the history of this as well for colleagues in the room who haven't necessarily followed every bit of it, but then I will give you absolutely where we are now. So it was, I think it was beginning of 2019 that the board took a proposal to do the merger on the back of a public consultation that had occurred, and the board decided not to progress the merger. I gave a commitment that I would not bring it back to the board and would respect the board's decision unless the law changed. That has been done. And that is exactly what we have done. It's not been discussed at all at the board meetings since then. And critically, the existing PCC will see out his elected term of office. So just to be really clear of that, because some people, including some of our MPs, have got this wrong. There is nothing about taking Simon Foster's role away before his full term has expired. Now, what has then happened, as the chair has said, is the government is changing the law. And the government, as in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, makes it possible for mayors to take on the powers of the PCC. To be really clear about that, that does not mean the PCC role is disappearing. It is being subsumed into the mayoral responsibility. And if you do that, you have to demonstrate how the PCC powers would then be delivered. The responsibilities don't disappear. But the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill is just literally in its last stages between the Commons and the Lords. And our expectation, but it is subject to Lords confirmation, is that the opportunity to do that will be in the bill when it goes for royal assent in the next couple of weeks. Straight answer to your question then, Chair. If the law changes in that way, I have always been clear that I will write to the Home Secretary seeking her agreement for the two roles to combine, i.e. the PCC powers moving to the mayoralty after the next election. The Home Secretary has to agree to that, and if that is agreed, then the offices of the Police and Crime Commissioner and indeed the combined authority have to just work out exactly how that actually would happen. There are obviously already models in Manchester and Leeds, but we don't necessarily have to follow every last detail of how they do it. So then, of course, there would be an election for the combined role, and the electorate would have their full say as to who they thought should do that job. That is where we are at.
Councillor McKee, questions asked?
Yeah, just following up on that, will it sort of come with teeth? Because I remember that it's Greater Manchester Police, isn't it? And obviously Andy Burnham has sort of control over that. I remember a couple of years ago, might be longer than that now, there was a damning report into Greater Manchester Police, which he came out and said how scandalous it was. And there's me shouting on the radio going, but you're the Police and Crime Commissioner. You're the one who's supposed to be sorting this out. So I don't have a problem with it being merged in, but as long as whoever the mayor is, hopefully you will take responsibility for it and do something about it rather than just say how bad it is. So will it come with teeth that you or whoever the mayor is can sort it out?
So it's a really interesting question. And I'm not going to sit here and comment on how Andy Burnham and indeed Sadiq Khan and indeed Tracy Brabin do the combined role. But it's interesting, wasn't it? When the police commissioner had to go, Sadiq was really the catalyst for her going. So in that sense, teeth. The interesting question, well, he'd been responsible for it with her for a period. So it was very interesting how that worked through. But, you know, I'll give you my personal view, and I'm actually entirely sure that the Labour candidate would say exactly the same thing. The issues around crime in this region are really, really acute. So we need to get our brains around this. If this happens, this is a huge additional undertaking for this organisation. I fervently believe that the issues around crime are merely the flip of the economy issues that are related to so many more things. And I think we could be more effective working across the broader piece. But I give you my word, it is the most significant change to this organisation and this role since it was set up. But I think it has to have an absolute priority in how we deal with it. And that's why we've really got to work really hard to make sure the structures are going to be a fit for purpose.
So I've got a couple of people indicating, and I know Councillor Marshall wants to ask a supplementary question, which is kind of a little bit more standalone, I think. So if you don't mind, Councillor Marshall, I will come to you, but I'll take the other two first. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so if I come to Councillor Warwick first, then please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andy. Interesting the comments you've made. I know in Warwickshire, our Police and Crime Commissioner is an extremely busy man. It's a full-time role. How do you see the workload and managing that if you try and combine the two roles into one? Because it is a dramatic increase in the work that you'll be expected to do. And obviously, we would want to make sure that both roles combined into one are delivered efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely right question. And this is why, again, I say, you know, this can't be underestimated, and all the work that the officers are doing as well to make it work is very important. But the answer has to be very straightforward. If you look at how it is in other areas, there are 3 areas already, London, Manchester and Leeds, where it's being done effectively and they've got the structures to do it. But it's all about who you have as your deputies. It's about how you delegate work. And I am a huge believer that if you get those structures, processes, people in the right place, it actually does work. I mean, that's how, you know, the biggest businesses in this country are often the most efficient and best run. So it's not just that scale makes something impossible. You've just got to have really efficient structures to make all of that work. And I don't know what if what I'm about to say is true, or will be true, sorry. There is obviously a question for both candidates in the election coming up. And the reason I say I don't know if it's true because I don't know quite how Labour would play it. But if we do go for this merger, I think it's beholden on both candidates to explain how it would be done. And actually, they might even talk about who some of the other players would be in those deputies' roles, because electors will want to know that you really thought this through so that you can deliver what is a very demanding piece like that.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bateman.
Almost stolen all my thunder with that question, because it's the most fundamental question that there isn't for us. Because on the doorstep, we're looking to talk about on the doorstep, but as you mentioned, on the doorstep, Mr. Mayor, On the doorstep, the big issue that all of us face, one of the big issues, is about policing and crime.
Yes.
There is a huge unhappiness at the moment, even in the low crime areas, that there is not enough resources being targeted on crime, and the structures that are in place in our towns and cities, and I can only talk about Wolverhampton, are weak in terms of staff, in terms of at the chalk face, and I think the public are really up to here with being given that as an excuse for not turning out in terms of the crime that takes place. And let's leave it as wide as that. So the importance of crime, if this new legislation is enacted, is really quite crucial. And anyone listening to this at the present moment will hear the word structures and think, oh, well, that's not going to be altogether helpful because it's impersonal. Most of them won't understand. We talk about structures all the while, and it's the structures that are stopping the resources taking place. If you're at the other end of the actions of a criminal, don't pick my words so I don't become too inflammatory. I would like you to take on board that whilst it's come out in the way that it has, and your response has been, as I would expect, bearing in mind it's so sudden and new. But the importance, the gravitas of getting this right if the legislation is enacted in full as we expect. The gravitas of that on ordinary people is huge. As big, I would say, almost, as the role that you have at the present moment, and there's a few holes and gaps that you're failing to fill on that. So I take on board what you've said, but I just want to underline, because the public's listening to this, this is a big, big, big issue for us, and getting it right, getting it wrong will not be accepted by the people outside there, and we all go on the doorstep for whatever election.
So I think you've chosen your words very well, actually, and I agree with you. And so the reason that I believe sometimes this is the right thing to do, but one of what I said, we wouldn't tackle it until the legislation changed, is what you hear from the public. If you ask members of the public what is the biggest issue in the West Midlands, it is crime. That is what they consistently say. And that's so in the, to use your words, the low crime areas, as well as the communities where crime is endemic. And you are also right that the resourcing that has been brought to that has not been sufficient. And that's for all sorts of reasons. And I don't want to be over political about this, but one of the things I hope people would say about me is I have been able to bring resources into the region. And I hope that some of the ways in which we've done that would actually be able to apply to the policing area as well. But your point is right. This is a very, very significant piece, and the public will expect us to get it right, and the public will be judging us, frankly, on whether we do get it right. But I think, do the public feel that it's correctly structured and delivering at the moment? No, they don't. They don't. And by the way, a key part in this, of course, is the delivery through the actual police force. And we have a new chief constable in whom I have enormous confidence, actually. And he has obviously got a critical role to play with whoever is elected as the new mayor if this structure goes forward to actually improve the delivery of operational policing. And if he was sitting here, he would acknowledge that that improvement had to occur.
Thank you. And I think that actually is a really timely point to bring in Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, talking about actions and what actions we can take, considering the Israel-Gaza conflict which is going on at the moment, Can you tell us how you are working with the current PCC to prevent hate crime in the area and help keep both Jewish and Muslim communities safe? Thank you.
With pleasure. So I think perhaps the most direct answer to that question is I have met with the Jewish community at their vigil last Sunday. Having had correspondence with each of the rabbis in the region. And I have to tell you that whatever is said in the media about Jewish attitudes in Israel, here I found the community to be incredibly principled, very, very hurt, caused by what had happened, but really understanding that their reaction here was critical to the harmony between different communities here. So I came away with admiration for their dignity, actually. And then last night, also on Sunday, I met with some leaders of the Muslim community, and they then arranged for me a meeting with 30 different Muslim leaders from different, largely mosque leaders from across the region. And the fascinating thing was the emotion was exactly the same as at the Jewish meeting, in that they were incredibly dignified, principled, hurt by the Islamophobia that they've already seen, and indeed what they've seen with their community in Gaza. And what we discussed at both meetings is the leadership responsibility, such that there is an appropriate response on the ground across the West Midlands. And I'm very clear, everyone has the right to protest, demonstrate here, but it must be done within the law. And I genuinely believe that Muslim leaders here are doing their very best to ensure that their community responds appropriately to the pressure that they're also feeling. And then, just to complete the answer, I've also had discussions with the Chief Constable about his interpretation of the guidance given by the Home Secretary and how he and his officers are policing the response on the ground. So it's a desperate situation on every measure, but I do believe that already here there is really good leadership being shown, and I've said to all of those people that I will play my role as a leader, not responsible for policing, to ensure that that continues.
Thank you, Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for being late. My question is about the BCC role. To be honest, it doesn't matter to me if the role has been merged to you.
Yeah.
The main issue is the public, and my colleague, Councillor Bateman, very eloquently put. I mean, the BCC was another U-turn by your government because they are the one actually brought them in the first place. And I'll take it another U-turn.
Right.
The main thing is the resources. So the West Midland Police lost 2,200 police officers since this government came in power. We have only one police station open 24/7, that is Central Birmingham. What you will do differently to bring the more resources to the West Midland, because the role is nothing. For me, we have one of the best police force in the world. They need resources. As my colleague mentioned, the people on the doorstep crying for the police, but there is no police. And I would not blame police officer because it's not their fault. It's the government need to provide them the resources and the funding so they can fulfill their duties.
Okay. So, so the first, just two things just to agree with you very clearly. I have not said anything to criticise the West Midlands Police. So you are right that you don't blame the police for the situation of a discontent, because that is also correct. Just on the numbers, the actual number of the day is that we're about 700 officers less than we were in 2010. But a huge majority of the shortfall has been rebuilt over the last 2 years since Boris Johnson gave the commitment to recruit. And where the two chief constables deserve great credit is if you look at where the recruitment has been most intense in the country, we have done well in that recruitment. And you'll like this little bit of the story. And it's the Chief Constable, no one else deserves the credit for this. He actually has taken up some more officers because the Met Police were not able to recruit pace to which they anticipated. So he is trying to build those numbers back quickly. Now, in terms of your question, in the sense, this is not it's a bit premature because it will come to the ballot box, won't it? This, who do you believe will deal with the resources? But I will simply say that the way I go about this is exactly how I go about everything else. Understand the detail of the numbers in the case and then make the case for investment. It's exactly what we've done elsewhere. We've been very successful in getting government to invest here. So I would commission the public to take exactly the same approach. And frankly, they will judge whether that is going to be successful or not.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on then to Councillor Kettle's question on MPs and mayoral Q&A session.
Oh, deep joy. Yeah.
Morning, Andy. Morning. Yes, through the devolution deal, it has been agreed that members of Parliament will be able to scrutinise the Mayor. These questions and Q&A sessions will be held 4 times a year. How do these MP sessions avoid duplicating our own question and answer sessions with the Mayor? And have you given your view to the government as to the likely value of such events?
Lovely question. Yes and yes is the answer. So let me just explain. And Ed here who will answer a number of questions. I should have said right at the beginning, my apologies, that Ed is here today because Laura is actually away, so he isn't able to join us today. But Ed will take any executive questions that might pass through, and I might just ask him to comment on this. But the honest answer to the question is this here. We think it's, I'll be polite, limited added value. And the reason it is there, and others can shout me down on this, but I genuinely believe this is true. The government wanted symmetry between the arrangements in Greater Manchester and here. And the feeling was amongst MPs in Greater Manchester that they really wanted this. I can honestly say no MP in the West Midlands of either party has ever said to me they want this. So it's sort of been encouraged with us without any real appetite for it. Now, what Ed has done valiantly is try, frankly, to water it down as we've gone through this. It was going to be more frequent, it was going to demand portfolio lead, it was going to be in London. All of those things have been changed. And one of the reasons that it's been changed, and it goes right back to the very first thing I said, is I believe that I'm accountable to members of the citizens in the West Midlands through you as their democratically elected representatives, as well, of course, as directly at the ballot box. And so, in a sense, we've argued we've already got a good process. And the concession they've agreed, for example, is those sessions will be chaired by the chair, by Cathy. So, in a sense, we've tried to glue those in. So the honest answer to the question is we've tried to water it down from where it stands. And I'm now at the point where if that's what it takes just to get it over the line, we will do it. And one last little wrinkle, and I shall deny this if this is made public. We've said that MPs need to support it. I know it's recorded, so I will be careful. I'll be careful. If there's an issue that MPs all desperately want imprisonment about, of course we would be accountable for that. But I honestly think that they'd probably be relatively infrequent. So we've got this notion they have to submit pieces in advance as well. And if there wasn't a number of suitable threshold of stuff to be done, we do. So I don't want to escape it in any way. I always say I enjoy accountability, but we really don't want to create some big monolith that takes away from the importance of this session.
Thank you. Okay. A single question to follow on then. The government's committed to give the combined authority a single capital revenue funding settlement at the next spending review through a single process with central government. Why do you think this is a good thing? And how do you envisage the combined authority utilising these new powers?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So let me try to explain why we think this is a breakthrough. You may remember when we had the Levelling Up Fund bids that I was a bit unpopular with some people in government because I described it as a begging bowl culture, i.e. we put proposal, sometimes on the case of Dudley, sometimes on the case of Coventry, whatever, and to government, and they decide. And sometimes it's pretty opaque when they decide what's going to happen. And they make one decision in the transport department here, and they make one decision in the education department here. And even if they're about the same city, Wolverhampton, they don't necessarily join up. What this is about is they agree a large sum of money with us, and then we, through all of our governance bodies, the board and all of that, so local authorities are fully represented in that, decide how that money is spent. So the actual decision rather than the application is nearer to the action. And what it also means, if we say, right, there's a real opportunity off the top of my head around the City Learning Quarter in Wolverhampton, we can make sure that different parts, just an example, different parts of our organisation can play their part in making that a success. We can get it sort of, the strategy overlaps. So that's the big thing. Actually, there's one other big thing. It also enables you to plan over time. If you know that you've got this settlement that will last probably 4 years between spending reviews, you will be much more effective if you plan over time than if you're waiting for each individual government decision. I'd like you, by the way, to give us more money, but even if it just gives us the same amount of money that we can plan in that coordinated way, I genuinely think it would be much better.
Okay, thank you.
Great question.
Just one more then, if I may. How will the funds be allocated more quickly to local authorities to enable the progression of projects or schemes? The key to delivering major projects on budget is speed, and speed is the key to success. So how can we speed things up? And part of my thinking was the concept of when a scheme is on the anvil within the CA, an awful lot of work in services, legal, design, all sorts of things we don't normally put together until after the money has arrived. But if feeder money was put into the process, say 4%, so that the services could be really on the anvil for when the money arrives and the job can be started much more quickly. That's the question really. Can we look at feeder money to speed things up?
I'm going to ask Ed to come in on this because just give you this one other bit of context, which will help everyone, I think. It's been brilliant that we've got this across the line with government, but actually, in a sense, the boot is on the other foot now. They're looking to us to think, okay, how are you going to prepare for this new responsibility? And we started the meeting talking about how far we might have come in 6 years in organising ourselves. There's now another really big mountain that we've got to climb to do this really well, so we get the advantages. So you are right to pick away at how we're going to do this. And this fellow is the executive director who's responsible for thinking all of this through. So I'm just going to pass to Ed in 1 second. But the general point, Ian, is I do put my hand up to this. This is not good enough within the CA at the moment. And just to acknowledge that it's not good enough, in our housing funds, we're having a complete review of the process as whether it is too slow, too demanding, frankly, for applicants to get through, because I know that in that area, we are actually sitting on cash that has not gone out the door as quickly as it should have done. Not so in transport, actually. I think it's the other problem in transport. We've spent enough. But there are areas of our operation where we do need to quicken that process. Now, to be fair, when the process design is all being about good husbandry, about money, all of that, but we know that we are not fast enough. So we are particularly examining how we can be quicker in that area. Ed, do you want to say anything about particularly the point that Ian is making about the sort of preparatory money?
So I think I'm just echoing to some extent what the Mayor's already said, but I think it's worth just drawing this point out, that the way in which the majority of the combined authorities funding comes to us at the moment is in relatively small, short-term grants. What that tends to mean across a range of different delivery programs is you don't know you're going to get it until you've got it. The moment you get it, you suddenly have to then mobilise staff, many of which we don't have, therefore that requires a recruitment process, to then quickly try and get things on the ground. And then there's a whole stack of monitoring and evaluation that goes with it as well. And then that grant comes to an end within 12 months, and you have to think about, well, what we're going to do with the staff we recruited to deliver that particular project or programme. And it's stop, start in that way. And that makes it incredibly difficult to deliver these programmes. However, as we move towards the single settlement, when we receive the single settlement, as the Mayor said, we will be guaranteed funding for 5 years, not in 70 different grant programmes, but in 5 different functions, against 5 different functions. That means that we will know that we can recruit staff, we can put in place all the processes we need to do for a 5-year period. It won't be stop, start, stop, start. And that means we can really then focus on delivery. To your specific point about whether we can seed fund different activities, and I would say this isn't exclusively about capital projects. I think there's a sort of obvious and important focus on capital projects, but the single settlement will be both revenue and capital funding. It'll be for programmes as well as projects. But the point is that if we can plan for that 5 years in advance, then yes, we absolutely can say we can put some pump priming funding into particular projects and development funding into different projects and so on. And what we're trying to do with the government at the moment is negotiate the maximum amount of flexibility that we can have, so that if necessary, if I can take an example of skills funding on the one hand and transport funding on another, or no, let me talk about retrofit funding. That's another one, because I think you may well want to talk about this later. One of the problems we've got at the moment is we don't have sufficient retrofit skills. So it's very difficult to deliver retrofit programmes. Within the single settlement arrangements, we might be able to switch funding between retrofit and skills in order to be able to make sure we've got the skills in advance of then rolling out the retrofit programmes we need to roll out. So that's a kind of practical example of how the single settlement will give us far greater flexibility, because at the moment, there is no way that the Department for Energy and Net Zero would allow us to do that, and the DFE wouldn't allow us to switch funding around in that particular way. So I hope that is an example of how we might be able to work much more effectively under a single settlement regime. And I would say, just to link it back to kind of previous comments, this is exclusively for Greater Manchester and for the West Midlands, and it is on account of the fact that we are effective in our accountability processes that they have trusted this particular approach to us for us to pioneer.
Thank you.
Please turn your mic off, please, Councillor. Councillor Moore, I'm going to start off the economy section with your question, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's 6 months now since the Black Country LEP was rolled into the Combined Authority effectively. I used to be a board member of it at one point in time. I wanted to know really what lessons have been learned from that, and what difference, if any, actually it's made. What reflections are there on it, and are we really ready for the remainder of the LEP sticking with the Combined Authority? That's my question.
This might not be what you mean by your question, but my first reflection on what we've learned is actually, if you look at the Black Country LEP, the presence of business voices around the table with local authority leaders was effective. I think it was well led. Its record was good, and I think one of the lessons we therefore take is how do we make sure that business voices continue to influence what goes on. We've done that in a number of ways. For example, we should have a business representative here today, but if you look at things like our regional business council, we're trying to do that. So I think that's a high level point, but it's definitely relevant. People who step forward from Black Country businesses to lead definitely improve decision making. So that's good. In terms of perhaps rather more that delivery and how we've gone, I think it's gone relatively smoothly. So on the back of the Black Country LEP, and you know I'm biased, I was a LEP chair, so I'm a believer in them, so I was sorry to see them go. That was a government decision. In terms of how we then managed to take the work on, the launch of Business Growth West Midlands, which is the fundamental thing that provides services to businesses now, elected to some extent, that has gone very smoothly. And actually the uptake, number of inquiries being dealt with by that organisation since the launch shows a definite increase. And so all the stuff around what it actually does, how it's been marketed, how easy it is to access it, looks really good. That comes on the back of a review that the CA commissioned 2 years ago, a review of business support, which the leaders all signed on. And the simplicity of accessing that support was one of the things we were really after. So I'm actually encouraged that the process, when something goes away, there's always a risk. The process has been pretty sound.
Okay, thank you. The next question is mine on the economic impact of HS2
Oh, gosh.
solution.
Oh dear, right.
So obviously, we've been clear that this isn't a transport scrutiny session.
Yeah.
But there is a clear issue for overview and scrutiny in terms of the economic impact of the decisions taken. So with the cancellation of the Birmingham to Manchester leg, there have been concerns raised regarding the impact that this may have on economy, jobs and skills in our region. Can you share your thoughts, please, on this and how the knock-on implications of cancelling the northern leg might factor into other existing plans of the CA?
Yeah, with pleasure. The first thing to say on this, just very straight up, is we have not yet done a piece of economic analysis on this. We are going to do that. We're going to commission that because obviously we had what we called our HS2 growth report. The first one was done right back in 2012, I think, 2012-13, and it's been updated a number of times. And we always said it will have this positive impact. So it is only logical that we then do another proper economic review and say what's now the situation. That will come, and this committee should quite rightly look at that when it does. However, in terms of where we are before we get that, proper hard-nosed analysis, it's not good news, is the bottom line, and it's why I fought as hard as I did to keep it. Let's just be clear exactly what is happening, though, because there's definitely some mitigation against the worst that could have occurred. So the proposal that the Prime Minister was examining 3 weeks ago now, maybe 4 even, was that the line would run from Old Oak Common to Curzon Street. What we've ended up with is Euston to Handsacre. So it is distinctly better from an economic point of view, because obviously if the trains go to Handsacre, they can then connect to the West Coast Main Line, and so whether you're travelling from Manchester, Glasgow or Liverpool, you still use the stem of it and it takes you into central London. So it's a lot better than what might have occurred. And also he has held the door open to me and Andy Byrne, to put it bluntly, putting proposals to him for the improvement of connections between Birmingham and Manchester. Now, let's be clear, I'm not suddenly going to persuade the Prime Minister to reinstate HS2, but there are lots of other proposals that can be made, and that is going to be worked on actively. And it was really important to me that that concession, and it came from the Prime Minister's speech at the podium, he said, we will welcome that, and we will get on to that, because the connections between Birmingham and the northern cities are obviously really important. And that, of course, is the weakness of our connectivity at the moment, particularly in Coventry, already well connected to London. The issue is connections further north, so we will do that. But obviously, the question then is slightly broader than the railway and the impacts. And the big question that's hard to answer is the inward investment impact. Now, you will all know that everywhere we've been telling our inward investment story around the world for the last 12 years since HS2 was first heard about, HS2 was in the first line of our sales pitch. And what's been very, very difficult to answer is how much that actually impacted on decisions. What we know is we have had brilliant inward investment stats. Numbers that came out in June, I think it was, for the last year, showed that we were comfortably the best outside of London. Our growth year on year was 48%, while the nation's number was -6%. And I do believe that HS2 being part of that story was really important. So what we have to do now is retell that story, because it wasn't exclusively about HS2, it was a part of it. So we have to retell that story, concentrating on all the other advantages we've got, the quality of our R&D at our university, the quality of talented people coming through. And we're still the best connected place in Britain. So we will retell it, but I know it will have some impact yet to be totally quantified. Just one last thing, because one of my worries was that it would have an impact on jobs in the construction right now. And because the government have committed to get on with phase one, no change in spec, and as quickly as possible, there will not be job losses with the existing contractors. And that was really important because about 12,000 people across the West Midlands actively engaged building that line now. Hopefully that's a slightly lengthy but thorough answer.
Thank you for that. So I've got Councillor Barker, followed by Councillor Bateman.
Chair, important point.
Can I come back to you for that?
I did need to
No,
compare
David,
non-pecuniary interest that
no.
has been highlighted by the mayor's response, and I do not want to fall foul of that. I have a non-pecuniary interest in the Birmingham International Airport because I am a director representing Wolverhampton. It came like a flash when you were talking, Mr. Mayor, about Manchester and the business interest and inward investment, and I'm really sorry I didn't.
That's all right. We'll record it for future meetings as well, so you don't have to remember.
And I think recorded that I sit on the board as well.
It doesn't matter for you, John, because you're only an observer, so you're not participating. Councillor Barker.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask, thinking about that, if any work has been commenced or completed into looking at the economic impact of the delays to the Camp Hill line, and if there's been any work on fixing a timeline to know when it will be completed after the delay of a year from further delays of a year, to give sort of businesses particularly confidence for investors locally. I should say I'm a ward councillor, board of 2 of the stations.
Yeah, of course.
And that's it. Thank you.
So I'm quite sure how you described the delays. You said a year on top of a year. So I think the maximum delay will be 1 year, but the work is going on very actively. Just as I said to the media I can't remember, I want to say June. It was not a particularly summery day where we did the media around Pineapple Road, but I think it was June. The programme between the West Midlands Rail Executive and West Midlands Trains and Network Rail remains exactly as I said then, that it will be by the end of 2024, and we're hoping and examining whether any of the 3 stations can open before. So that's the mental situation just as described. What I hope businesses take is confidence that even if it is a matter of months later than we previously said, which it is, no disguising that, it's coming. And they can have absolute certainty. And after 70 years of it not coming, and lots of people having talked about it, I'm the one who's got on and won the money, through, it's coming.
What's the tenant?
Thank you. You talked in your answer to Councillor Bateman about how important transport connectivity is to economic growth.
Yes.
And answering HS2, you talked then about all the other money that's being redirected from HS2 to that was in this meeting, but
I didn't. Elsewhere we have.
Yeah,
Not now. We can come on to that with pleasure then.
yes. What I wanted to know is, given the government had promised HS2 North was going to go ahead to Northern Leaders for a long time, and we've already started seeing them U-turn on the commitments they gave just weeks ago in Manchester.
Yes.
What reassurance can you give to businesses in our area these will be done in full? Yeah,
that's very fair. Very fair. So I think I'll tell you the story, and I shall take a risk with whatever broadcast might be on this. The reason I can give you reassurance on this, and you are right, some of the other areas of the country can't give the same reassurance, is that the way this played out in Manchester, and people will have seen that I made a stand for our region to protect what I thought was right. And because of that, the Prime Minister's team did discuss the, whatever you might want to call it, the concessions or whatever with me directly. And so what is in that Network North document for us was discussed with me. And that's why I know they are things that A, we need, and B, can be delivered. So just quickly to go through them. The first item was, and this was all reported, by the way, in detail to WMCA board on Friday by the chief executive, so it's all there in the public record. The first item was 1.75 billion for Midland Rail Hub in full, and the critical words there are in full. And the reason we were able to get that clearly, and I know it will happen, is that we were already progressing this application through DFT and Treasury. So unlike lots of the other things in the Network North document, they're not fanciful new ideas that were just pulled off the shelf at short notice, but they were actually things that we were working on the business case. The detailed design has been done, so that will definitely happen. And connecting to what we've just heard from Councillor Barker, we need to go through and work out exactly what the benefits of that are to each community. So how does it connect the Camphill line to Longbridge? How does it deal with the Ford and Castle Bromwich and Sutton Coldfield and all those things? So there's lots of detail in that, but it is definitely for real and the money's there. Then they talked about £1 billion for the CA, and that was split between 700 million additional CRSTS money. That we know how to spend CRSTS money, the board will decide on it, and every borough will participate in that success. So that's good, it's definite. And then they talked about 100 million of addition to current CRSTS budgets, 50 million of which will be for the inflation pressure on the Wednesbury to Bradley Hill Metro new line. And that gives us confidence, and Councillor Kettle will be interested in this, that gives us confidence we can now build it in full for Bradley Hill. So that's the missing piece, and that's why that communication has been done, and the express to start picking up. And then the other half was for Solihull for 50 million for the infrastructure works to enable Arden Cross. Exactly how that money will be spent, we don't yet know. We have to work it through with Solihull Council, of course, responsible for the planning there. And then there is 250 million of support for our existing transport network, reflecting the fact that this isn't about shiny new. This also has to make sure that we sustain what we have already got. And so I am utterly certain that the things in our case are A, new money we didn't have two Wednesdays ago, and B, we know exactly how they will be spent.
Yeah, do you have a firm timetable for when all of this will be delivered, or is that still being worked on?
Yeah, good question. All of it. No, is the simple answer. I mean, some parts of it, yes, we can talk about the Wednesbury Bradley Hill Metro, of course, and be definite about that. But if you take the CRSTS 2, that will all be in the, let's get this right, that's the second phase, it's 27 to 32. But the good thing is you can start preparing for that now as the current CRSTS money, which is over £1 billion, runs down. But the one that the question is most relevant to is Midland Rail Hub. The straight answer to the question is I do not yet have the exact dates that will be implemented. We were literally talking with Network Rail about this yesterday, and no promise on this. This is my pitch. What we want to try to achieve is we get early benefit, for example, at Kings Norton and at Snow Hill, but they have not told us where the cash has been put into Network Rail spending controls. So that's what we need to find out yet. When the cash is actually being allocated to Network Rail to spend.
You just talked about Northern, which is near me. You said you weren't quite sure the timetables on that because allocations need to be sorted, but you were posting on social media earlier this week that will be delivered.
It will be delivered.
So, but if you don't know yet, if it hasn't been sorted yet with
No. It has been sorted, but the cash is there for that work, so it will be delivered. Exactly. Your next question was, which year will it be delivered? And I have never said when that will be delivered because we have not yet negotiated that with Network Rail. But absolutely for certain, the application for this, the detail of this that has gone to Treasury includes the work of Kings Norton. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Actor?
Thank you, Chair. Given the lackluster support and approach by the government to find a suitable operator to build the gigafactory in Coventry Airport site, can you please assure us that you will continue your support for the project And what else you can do to encourage actually government? Because we know that the talks underway at the moment between the parties to get this project off the ground, because the gigafactory at this scale will be a lifeline for our manufacturing and the jobs and prosperity in our region. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you for asking this. This is important as well. I suppose the one-word answer is yes. Can I reassure you? I'll continue to do all that we can. I think it's important just to understand who does what in this, because Coventry City Council, whom you represent, and the private owner have done a good job as the the name of the I've forgotten the name of the joint venture. That's the word I'm looking for. As the joint venture promoting this. Yeah. Okay. And they would say I played my part in that as well. But critically, the government cannot make this happen without a private sector investor coming and saying we want to locate ourselves there. So it just isn't really right to say that anybody's been lackluster, because we have to persuade a private sector investor to ask the government for the cash that is needed. Now, where we are, and I'm not going to say names because it has to remain commercially confidential, but it is that I have personally taken a private sector investor to see the Chancellor, and he has indicated that in theory, if the application comes forward, the government would be determined to support this. But there is no lack of intention. We have to have the actual financial application that then gets cash from what is called the Automotive Transformation Fund, which the government set aside. And it's that fund, for example, where we've been very active. I literally got on a plane to Mumbai to meet the chair. Is that fund that has supported Tata in their application for a battery factory? As it turns out elsewhere in the UK, but as we all know, Tata is a huge investor in the West Midlands, and lots of jobs here will be protected because of that. So the government is supportive of that process, but they need an individual application to respond. And I have tried to bring that applicant, but I've sat that applicant in the Chancellor's office myself.
Much for that clarity.
Actually, Madam Chair, do you mind if I just say one other thing? Because I think this is worth just saying, because Councillor Akhtar is absolutely right. That gigafactory would be game changing. But I think it's important when we think we don't put all our eggs on that basket, because actually Coventry, Solihull, Warwickshire is already becoming a brilliant place for electric vehicles, even without that factory. So if you go to Tata Tech, for example, in Warwick, if you go to Mayoral in Nuneaton, there are thousands of people with their jobs already in this sector. And again, same theme. One of the reasons is the universities are brilliant in their research in this. So we've got to, in our inward investment, keep in that particular drum. It's one of the key sectors in our economic plan. The gigafactory, I always like to describe it like the keystone in a bridge, but all the other bricks are coming as well, and they are in their own right very valuable.
Councillor Burrow.
Thank you, Chair. Andy, you know I come from Vauxhall Common. We sit on the A452, and that is a key route for people from Warwickshire to access the station, HS2 station. And whilst that project has been reduced, it is still a quick route to London. I believe they're actually still digging the tunnel to get into London. Do you see that the combined authority will help with the Vauxhall Common Relief Road in order to get the traffic lights delay at Kelsey Lane and through Vauxhall Common actually sorted so people can get easily around Vauxhall Common, despite the fact that there's going to be 2,000 new houses and I don't know if 6,000 new cars wandering around Vauxhall Common, which will just clog up the roads even more.
You are a rogue. So please commit now that you can have this money. So let me just say, the chair will confirm this. I cannot sit here and cut across all of the governance processes in the CA and say, yes, you can have your money. You know, that would be a route to nowhere. But what I can say is that in our expected applications and expected expenditure that the housing team do, it says X million pounds for Solihull Council for Walsall Common Bypass. So the expectation is there that you have to go through the processes fairly. But yeah, that would seem an appropriate thing to do because it enables that very substantial, well, it enables us to get the most out of the HS2 stage and say it also helps with the housing, potential housing development in the village. So definitely yes.
Thank you.
Nice try, councillor. We move on then to skills and labour market questions. So I've got councillor Marshall first.
Thank you, Chair. We've kind of covered a bit about job creation and industry, but I wanted to ask more specifically what you were doing to ensure that the West Midlands region is creating jobs and supporting industries for young people who are entering the job market.
Yeah. I think there's two ways of answering this, and then there's probably a bit of real reflection at the end. So I think the first thing is actually about making sure that jobs are there in the sectors that are going to grow. So we might not have branded, as we call it, our plan for growth, a plan for growth, but by its very nature, if it's focusing on the areas of the economy which are growing fastest, have got the most potential, is likely to produce the type of jobs where young people are likely to move into them. So in our plan for growth, the 8 key sectors, and what we try to do, back to the question about the demise of the LEPs, we try to use all the public money that we've got to stimulate those sectors. And if you take some of those, like all the different elements of tech, or the sort of announcements you've heard this week about jobs in the tech sector, and then of course logistics, which has been made in the tech sector, the med tech sector, of course professional services, which are becoming tech as well, all of those areas will produce the jobs for young people. Now, the second half of it, though, is what are we doing to make sure young citizens here actually have the skills to move into those jobs? And that is actually, in a sense, a harder thing to do at the moment. I will just give you 2 pieces of data, and I offer this very much in the spirit of we have not solved this, but we've all got to think about this. We have got, the country talks about having lots of vacancies, but still lots of unemployed people. We have got an acute version of that. So we do have higher rates of unemployment across the WNBA, particularly youth unemployment than elsewhere. But at the same time, we have enormous numbers of vacancies, and our vacancy numbers, in contrast to the country, have actually gone up in the last quarter, not down. But the real question is, how do we make sure that those young people get the skills to move into those jobs? So what we try to do, and please, I don't want to say we can do it all ourselves, that would be ridiculous. We try to work with, for example, colleges, training providers to look at 2 things. Number 1, some specific things about sectors where jobs are being created. Best example of that would be what we're doing with digital. Because if you go on a digital training course, you are likely to get a job. And we've just announced this week another £15 million for digital training. And then we also, and if you take something like electric vehicles, you take something like broadcast skills, all the sort of creative specific programs. Then what we also try to do is make sure through our college programme that those who've not achieved perhaps the level of qualifications from schools that they might, that we then give people the opportunity to give those qualification levels. So the way we assess ourselves is how we're doing in terms of total population achieving good level 3, which tends to be sufficient to move into one of those levels. And that's really what we should be being judged on in that. It's probably worth saying at the end of it though, the paper this room with evidence of both of those things, both the sectoral focus and the training focus being done, we are still not achieving what we need. Certain areas of WMCA do still have the high levels of youth unemployment. Not all levels, because some wonderful success stories actually, but certainly Hampton I would call out as very challenging. And if you look at total employment, it's very challenging. better than youth unemployment, actually. There's something very interesting in Birmingham, that the youth outcomes are better than total outcomes, which is in contrast to what happens in most of the country. But we have still got some real challenges about it. That's the approach.
I think you've pretty much answered the following two questions, Andy.
That's good.
But I think what I was kind of at, where you said that we've got higher vacancy rates than the national average, whilst having higher unemployment rates. And I suppose the question is, are the high vacancy rates in highly skilled areas, in which case do we need to be, what is the focus in upskilling, or are the vacancy rates in insecure employment and low paid employment, which are really unattractive for people because they can't afford to take them? So I suppose it's whether or not that analysis has been done. And if it is in the high skilled area, what's the answer to it?
It's a really, really good question. So oddly enough, I brought just one piece of paper for this, because I wanted to make sure I got this absolutely right for you, because I thought this might come up in some way. So every month we get the CA team, and Kathy, if you wanted this to go around the members, it would be helpful, I think, because all the detail is there. We do a monthly assessment of the labour, call it the labour market overview, which the skills team do. And the latest one we've got actually is on the back of the August national numbers. There's inevitably a little delay. And what that says is across the region, 136,000 vacancies, which is a very substantial number. And that is higher than the total claimant count across the region. And I think I'm right, but don't quote me on this yet. I need perhaps to check it. I think, no, I'm not. I was going to say every one of the authorities have a higher number of vacancies than unemployed people. Solihull, of course, has the best data, so they have twice as many vacancies as people claiming anyway, never mind. You've got the big picture that, and even in Birmingham, there are more vacancies than the total number of claimant counts, which is very, very telling. So, and that number, just in a month, the vacancy number went up here by 17%, which is very much in contrast to the national position. Now, what we then have is the nature of the vacancies. And the straight answer to your question is they are the biggest number of vacancies actually in some of what you probably call good but mid-paying areas. So things like nursing, no surprise, but huge numbers in some of the really advanced areas like IT programs and software developers. So what comes out of that, these are not just simple entry-level jobs. These are careers. So what we are doing in response to that, it's about upskilling people, reskilling people. And I think where the challenge is in this region is historically we've had too many jobs at low paid levels. And maybe jobs that are not that sustainable. So there's a big task in the reskilling, okay? And that's why an announcement I'm really pleased with recently, we've made all of our training programs free to anybody earning up to £30,000. And we're the only part of the country that made that decision, because that is deliberately to say to people who may be earning 15, 20,000, whatever, an entry-level job, there is an opportunity for you to retrain to get to a higher level because of this mix of vacancies.
That's helpful.
Could I ask a supplement?
Yes. Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah, I mean, that situation is not new. I mean, I remember in 2015, 2016, saw a stat for Birmingham that was pretty much the skilled jobs never had 100% level, and it wasn't that businesses never had someone, they were just poaching someone off someone else and they were just going round and round in circles. Do you have any idea when that figure, because what you're doing is what something absolutely needs crucial to be done, do you have an idea when that figure may come down though? As in when more the vacancies will start to be filled for a lack of skilled people?
Well, it's interesting because some might say we don't want the vacancy number to come down because that's a sense of the health of the economy. I think what I am absolutely sure of is on the data and when we can supply all of this as well, how many more people are being provided into the system who've got the skills to meet the job opportunities. We can see we've got all the data on the improving workforce outcomes, and there's been a dramatic increase in that. I'll just give you one stat. Get this right. Over the last, actually, it's about this, and we can give it you precisely. Over the last 5-6 years, the proportion of the total workforce at that level 3 has gone up by about 10%. And given most people in the workforce the same as they were 5 years ago, what that tells you is that people coming into the workforce, back to the first question about young people, are dramatically better qualified for these roles. And so there is definite hope in that there. But to be honest, what we've also got to do, nursing is a very important professional qualification. We've got to work with the providers there. So there's a live conversation with the UHB, University of Coventry. We'll have to say, how do we up the cohort numbers there? And that then comes back to their funding pieces. But I can give you all the data on how better qualified.
Just finish off this section then, Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Andy.
Hi.
My question is regarding apprenticeships
Yes.
in businesses, particularly small businesses.
Yes.
What funding is available for them? And also, I'd like to say that I'm out and about talking to people. And one particular young man has actually said to me, he's in his 30s now, he said he never had the chance to do an apprenticeship. And he didn't leave school with very high qualifications. He's not one for sitting down and writing in a classroom. He said, but if he's given a job to do, he can do that job. So basically, it's certain people cannot sit in the classroom, they just flunk it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's the company's actually taking them on to actually learn the skills and the knowledge while they're on site, while they're learning, and then do an absolutely fantastic job of that job without the qualifications to go with. Without me gaining the qualification, without even realising they're gaining them.
So there's 2 parts to your question, Vera. On the second part, that is exactly what lots of our boot camps are designed to do. So please, I'm not saying that this is what he would choose, but if you look at something we branded it Construct and Gateway, because often practical people of the type you've described, they want to go and do a hands-on job and do, like, electrician, carpentry, plant, whatever. And so, yeah, we fund through our colleges lots of quick programs to get people the ticket to go to that area. So that would be, again, us trying to be really practical in responding to that type of person. You might say that's not for him, but those boot camps, or those swaps, as we call them, sector-based work academies, are there in all sorts of very narrow, distinct areas through each of our colleges, but they're all practical things. That's the key point.
Yeah.
And so if I would refer to anything, the Sector-Based Work Academy brochure, which covers the offer across all West Midlands colleges that we've pulled together, would be the perfect place for him to say if he inspired. But his example enables me to tell you about the more general thing. Now, on SME apprenticeships, there's never enough money, is there, for this? Let's be honest. But one thing we have done uniquely here, to answer your question head on, which I'm really pleased with, is what we call our Apprenticeship Levy Transfer Fund. Because that's a bit of a mouthful, but let me explain. What happens is a big company that pays its apprenticeship can't spend all its levy money, apprenticeship levy, and usually any unspent money just goes into the treasury. What we got agreement to, that goes into a pool here in the West Midlands uniquely. We're the facilitator of that, and then we match that pool up with SMEs who would not be able to afford putting an apprentice in themselves. So we pay that through other people's levy. That, I think, is now at £45 million and continues to roll over year on year. And I'm very pleased to say, really persuaded Department of Education that we should test that here. I'm very honest, I thought by now they'd roll it out across the country and they're not done so. But if there is an SME in your patch who's thinking, where do I get that particular funding? Again, you can send a text to me, friends, or anything else, but that is a facility we've put in place.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the next area now, which is the Green Policy Agenda, and Councillor Lumby.
Chair, Andy, in your opening address, you mentioned net zero. So
Yes.
I think you probably knew something was going to come about it.
I guess.
regarding government announcements, can you please share your thoughts on the impact of recent government announcements relating to net zero and the strategic risk due to pushing back timescales for delivery policies? And one in particular is electric vehicles, or the banning of cars and diesels now to 2035, and how that may impact on jobs in the West Midlands, especially when I know JLR welcomed it, but demand-wise, demand seems to be going down because you've got prices for electric are up, prices for electric vehicles are up, insurance is up, and the prices for on-street charging are ridiculous. Where do you go forward on this?
Okay, great question. I will come head on to electric vehicles in just a minute, but there were one or two other things in the announcement as well that we need just to cover, as you asked me what I made of the announcement overall. So this could sound platitudinous, but I think it needs saying. The Prime Minister said we were still going to achieve net zero by 2050. You'll all have your view as to whether the country's on target for that, and you'll all judge that. But my reaction to that is, and the WMCA, and this is exactly the decision of the board, is sticking resolutely to our plan for WM 2041. And we are getting on with all sorts of different investments that you can ask me about. And if you add up the total amount of cash being spent on different elements of this, it is hundreds of millions, if not billions of pounds here. Okay, so we are not for changing. Okay, and the reason I'm so resolute about this is, I don't know what the average age of people is in this room, but I'm dead sure if you ask young people their view on this, whatever else has happened in the world, they still see this as an absolutely top issue. Now, then, though, second thing is the Prime Minister addressed the whole domestic energy piece. And the reason I want to dwell on this 1 second is actually I agree entirely with what he said, because the truth is the market has not responded to this. And we do not have solutions for hydrogen coming through our heating systems for mass use of heat pumps and all of that. So we can all say what we want as politicians, but actually how to do it has not moved on. So what was said was actually sensible. However, in the electric vehicle space, clearly the market does know how to do this. And so I was clear on the television that day, hopefully respectfully, but I didn't agree with what was done, because I do think the country is moving into a tipping point here, and businesses have invested, in this case, this word is right, literally billions on the basis that there'd be an expectation by 2030. And if you are running, well, JLR were quite neutral in what they said, but lots of other automotive businesses were very clear that you can't plan on one thing and then have it changed. So I think it was the wrong decision, to be really clear. Now, in terms of the impact, it's very, very difficult to know, because you could argue that we were actually past the tipping point in terms of consumer behaviour, therefore possibly not as much impact as one would otherwise think. And we don't yet know that, actually. And if you look at the investments that were already being made by automotive businesses, because they're on such a long lead time, you could also argue that they're not being changed. And you haven't, by the way, seen any automotive business say we're changing our investment plan on the back of it. So it's very difficult to know, but certainly from this region's economic plan perspective, we're still absolutely, as Councillor Akhtar's question drew out, absolutely on to this is a huge opportunity for us, and no let up in our effort to investment in that area. That's what I think.
Thank you, Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up what you're saying around the automotive industry, there is, as you're well aware, a lot of rhetoric out there about there being a war on motorists. There's equally a lot of conversation around electric vehicles being sort of a smokescreen for the issue we have with gridlock and congestion. And yesterday, the National Infrastructure Commission, probably aware, advised pumping a huge amount of money into areas like that. Exactly. And there was evidence to put it in. Yes. Public transport at a level we don't have. But they also suggested a congestion charge. So I just wondered if you would support congestion zones anywhere in the West Midlands, in addition to the kind of rollout you want to see.
Thank you. It's a very interesting question. So everything we've said about electric vehicles being critical is right, but they do not solve congestion. Your point is right. So we do still have at the same time to be dramatically improving our public transport, and that's why I see earlier questions. I will do all I can to continue to drive investment in terms of capital, but also let's think about fares, let's think about reliability. All of those things are what make people's decisions, and why I'm a huge believer in the work that's been done to improve the quality of the public transport, as well as just the sort of capital investment. Like going to deal with NX, going back to the basic stuff, is really important, because that, for most people in Birmingham, that is what matters. And certainly if you move away from Birmingham, even more so, the bus is the thing that matters. So that was really important. But so I agree with that. Huge investment in public transport alongside the move to on congestion charge, and we have to be really clear about this. I was a supporter of the clean air zone in Birmingham. Some in my party disagree with me on that, but I was, and people will judge me for that. But I am not categorically a believer in congestion charges elsewhere in the region. To be honest, the air quality issues are a lot less bad in other parts of the West Midlands than they were in central Birmingham. They are steadily improving anyway as technology moves forward. And I'm not a believer in just the stick of the congestion charge, because we do not yet have good enough alternatives elsewhere. I'm much more a believer in it. I could argue possibly if I choose one area, and I'm not saying this to be congestion charge, please don't misunderstand me there. The quality of public transport in Coventry is actually, I do think the bus function in Coventry, and others may disagree, but I do think that becoming impressive. We've built green matrix becoming impressive. But straight answer to your question, I do not believe in congestion charge.
Thank you. We can just go back. The clean air zone charge in Birmingham, just to be clear, isn't a congestion.
No, I know. So that's why I made
many
the distinction. Exactly.
I just want to clarify then. Would you then say a congestion charge would work in Birmingham?
No. That's the whole. That's we're in agreement. That is the whole point. That the clean air thing was the clean air zone in Birmingham was right, because it was trying to address the pollution issue that needed to be addressed in Birmingham. The pollution ratings are significantly less high in other parts of the West Midlands, and so that's doing its job. But I do not support the principle of a congestion charge as distinct to a clean air zone.
Thank you. The next two questions I've received from Friends of the Earth, which we're going to take, and then as I said at the start, as a way of trying to get members of the public or other groups a little bit interested in the work of the combined authority. So I think it's worth progressing. So their first question is around climate emergency and action plans. So with the combined authority and local authorities within the West Midlands having declared climate emergency, what are you doing to support local councils to have clear climate action plans and to act on them following stated targets and timescales?
And the second question, is it related?
No, the second one's a little bit different. It's on wall homes.
Okay. Okay. So this could sound glib. The answer to that question is, of course, the WM 2041 plan. So just to go back a bit, Friends of the Earth were influential in getting the CA board to declare its climate change emergency and inputted to all the public consultation around WM 2041. And of course, now we are working to implement that. And often we implement with a local authority. So if we take something like retrofit, which is proving to be the most challenging part of that whole plan, there are schemes, let me get this right, with Coventry, with Birmingham, with Dudley, with Sandwell, probably with others as well, with Solihull definitely, So, you know, they are our partners in delivering that crucial piece. And if we think of the public transport element, which is obviously, transport is a huge part of the whole emissions piece in this region, about a third of it. Again, our partners in delivering every scheme, whether it be a cycleway, a bus prioritisation route, and an extension to the physical infrastructure of the public transport, it's all partnered with a local authority. So that might sound glib, but that is the key point. We can't deliver any of this without the partnership with the local authorities. And that then enables them to achieve their own goals as well.
Ed?
I can just, of course, come in on this because there's some news from this week in relation to the work that the Combined Authority is doing on the climate emergency. So there's an independent organisation called Climate Emergency UK that publishes scorecards of all local authorities and combined authorities across the country. It's well renowned and understood, and it's published its 2023 action scorecards literally this week, and the West Midlands Combined Authority comes joint first with GLA in relation to all its work around the climate emergency. So that's new news, and there are scores for all our local authority partners as well.
Yeah, I saw those scorecards. I was obviously particularly interested in Dudley's, but sadly, the 4 Black Country authorities come below the average for the country. So there's clearly some work to be done with Black Country authorities to ensure that they are on target and able to deliver. Councillor Marshall, supplementary.
Actually, it was on a slightly different thing, if that's okay, but it was hardly came up through that, but shall I
Can I take the other Friends of the Earth question then first, and then I'll come to you, so it boxes off for the Friends of the Earth. Thank you. So the next question from Friends of the Earth is carbon reduction and retrofit. What strategies does the WMCA have to identify sufficient funding for the implementation of the domestic retrofit programme needed to support the plan for net zero? How is the CA working with local authorities implementing urgent programmes for residents living in fuel poverty?
So this is difficult. Now, that isn't that we don't have a plan of good action, but in terms of what needs to be achieved in terms of retrofit against the resources that there are, this is very difficult. But the answer to the question is that the CA is working actually hand in glove with the LAs, and particularly the CA has built what we call sounds a bit pompous this, a centre of excellence around how to do this, and then bids that go into central government for funding are steered by the CA with our local authority colleagues. And Ed will remember the number exactly. Is it 75 million that's come out of that process? But it has been relatively successful. 86, my apologies, thank you very much. That's always best to underestimate. 86 million that has come out of that. And then we have on the ground in the authorities I've just mentioned, active, call them pilot schemes, if I'm honest. They are at scale and for real. But the reason I say they're pilot is if you think of the total number of homes across the West Midlands that need retrofitting against the numbers that we're currently dealing with, it's not sufficient. WM 2041 requires 300,000 homes to be retrofitted, and I think we're running at about 3,000 to 5,000. So there's a long way to go. We're not out of line with anywhere else in the country. We look at doing better. We built deliberately this idea of a centre of expertise that can work with all our RAs to enable them to achieve more. Good, mate. And he's a specialist subject, actually. So he's pleased to come in on that.
I really want to relate this question back to the earlier question about the single settlement.
Yeah.
Because one of the reasons why we are struggling to deliver at the pace that we really love to deliver at is because the way in which retrofit funding is currently distributed is in multiple grant programmes for very small and limited activity that we then have to stitch up to deliver against the type of housing that we've got. We're not able to do it at scale because we're having to follow the guidelines and bid for the funds that government is putting on offer, which don't necessarily always match the housing stock that we've got. Under the single settlement, the negotiation that we're having at the moment will be that all of that retrofit funding that we might expect to have over the course of the next 5 years, which we expect to be in the region of between 400 and 500 million pounds, would come to the region at the beginning of that process, and we would then be able to have a much more flexible plan, which we can adapt to the housing stock that we've got across the region, work much more closely with our local authority and housing providers across the region in order to spend that much more effectively. The other thing that that does is that it means that our skills providers, SMEs, our larger developers and so on will all see the kind of message that sends to the market, and will all be much more prepared to invest in the production and the skills and so on to make the supply chain work. This is for me a huge opportunity that will come through the single settlement.
And if I may add, it's a lovely example of what the question around skills and employment throughout. Because we've been able to fund with our colleges specific training in retrofit. And when I was last told that this has changed, I stand corrected, 100% of the people who had gone through one of those programs had found employment. So it's exactly what we're talking about, a new growing area where the market needs stimulating because the private sector aren't comfortable that there's going to be continuity of demand. And one way in which we can stimulate it is by providing people there. So it's almost a case study linking a number of the conversations we've had. It comes absolutely to Ian's question, what advantage do you get of controlling all of that budget over time, as Ed's just said? So it's the best example of Ian's question.
That's the Mayoral.
Thank you very much. So obviously we're talking about reducing the need for as much energy, but of course, I'm sure everyone agrees with me, it's incredibly important that the UK becomes energy self-sufficient.
Yes.
We no longer rely on foreign oils coming in. So with that in mind, what energy creation opportunities are we looking at in the West Midlands? And specifically, I'm thinking of the West Midlands Combined Authority acting as enablers for community energy opportunities in the area.
We haven't done that, and to be very honest, there isn't a plan for us to do that. We have, I don't want to dodge your question, but this is true. We have put our energies much more into reducing energy consumption and thinking both in domestic and also industrial settings, really important, particularly in the Black Country, the new funding that we've just secured to get energy efficiency in our SME industrial businesses in the Black Country. Really good that was done, spurred by the Black Country led to the earlier question. We haven't really taken on the energy production piece, apart from one thing. In all of the money that we allocate around housing developments, we do demand good standards, and where we allocate it to industrial schemes, we tend to demand, solar panels on roofs, things like that. But we have not taken on a role for stimulating micro energy production. Maybe we should, but we haven't thus far as the straight answer.
Maybe some things to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to housing now, and we're going to kick off with a question from Councillor Warwick, followed by a couple of questions from Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Chair. And this has been discussed and touched upon a few times. And one of the comments I'm going to make is echoing a comment that Councillor Marshall just made. This isn't just about the green agenda. This is about energy security. Yeah. With what happened, Russia, Ukraine, and what's happening in the Middle East at the moment, it shows how important it is to have energy security in the UK so that we can meet our needs and that we can secure that the costs that are paid by consumers are reasonable and affordable. We had a retrofit scheme in Warwickshire as well. As successful as these things are, they are dependent on having the actual panels to put on the roofs and the people to bolt them on. And that I've found with people I know in domestic settings who want to purchase them themselves is often the issue. It is the supply chain and getting it to hold up as the demand is higher. What can you do as the Mayor of the West Midlands to build production and supply into this so that there's some security, and as you say, to build that confidence that people will want to retrofit Because that is the key to both the green agenda and energy security.
So I've given you one answer, won't go over it all again, about the supply of people there. Ed's given you another answer, which is the smoothing of the demand, so that businesses which tend to be small scale are there for consistency. So that is definitely right. And then the third thing we are doing is, if you look at our plan for growth, one of the sectors that we called out as an area of specialisation is what we call future housing. So this is everything from the design to the construction, the modular piece. So, for example, inward investors looking in that sector for production facilities, the work that goes on, particularly at Wolverhampton University, thinking about the technology here. So we're trying, you know, this again, if you're particularly interested in this, there's 1,001 things under that one sector. But we've called that out as an area of nurturing in particular. And that's what the public sector can do with the private sector in those areas. So it's identification, and then the different elements of it is the way we're approaching that.
Councillor Akhtar?
Thank you, Chair. If we are out to achieve net zero, we must retrofit every single building in this country. And
No, not for net, not for net. Carry on though, but this is not quite right.
Okay. Well, I mean, achieving the net zero, all the property must be retrofit. If we can't do that, obviously, we're not going to achieve net zero. And it's a huge task. It's a huge challenge, very complex issue. And you will agree, the government, the LAs and CA, they can't do it alone. It must be a partnership with the private sector, maybe. I've got an idea, and I'll ask this question somewhere else as well. If the combined authority set up a pot where people can access maybe a 0% loan or very low interest loan, like student finance, where people can actually access to that money and retrofit their house and then pay back in the long term. Because at the moment, if I would like to retrofit my house, it would cost me maybe 20 grand or something, and I haven't got that money. But if I get money somewhere on the low interest or maybe 0% interest, I will do it and I'll pay back on the long term. And if a combined authority look into this and set up something like that, I think will be a first maybe pilot in the country where people get access to their money and pay back. It would not be a grant. People will pay back like student finance. Just an idea.
So it's a sound idea, and nothing is wrong in this area. But let me tell you why we've not done that. And some of you may disagree with me over this. We've not done it for two reasons. Number one, the government did have a scheme where individual householders could apply to generous. Even values would be quite generous. And what happened was two things were wrong with it. Number one, there wasn't much uptake. Three things were wrong with it. Not much uptake. The people who did uptake it were quite wealthy and probably didn't need to have the support. And number three, it did individual homes. And that individual home is very, very inefficient. And what we've tried, if you're a contractor, just think about it, if you can do a whole estate, it's much more efficient than one individual one. So what we've tried to do is use the convening power that we have and the ability to raise cash to do much bigger schemes where we would take a whole estate, still down to the citizen to say, do they want to do it? But if we go and look around the London estate in Solihull, which is perhaps the best example of this, working with the council there, you can actually see that a huge number of people have taken it up, and the contractor will say it's far more efficient. And the public money is being used on a lot of social homes there, rather than, frankly, helping people who should be able to pay for it themselves and get the benefit over time in their reduced bills. So it's a good idea, but that's my answer to why we have not thus far done that.
Okay, so I've got a question around the pace and the speed of delivery of affordable housing within the region. I think you commented yourself, Mayor, back in, can't remember, might have been April, May time, that we hadn't delivered at pace on affordable homes. So what's your plan to speed up that delivery, and does it involve any kind of modern methods of construction within that plan?
Great. So let's just be precise about this. On the normal definition of affordable, actually, so big picture, we've big picture, we've doubled the rate of house building across the total region over the last 8 years. And the affordable percentage within that has been about the same. So obviously you can all do the math. What we were calling out in May was what might be called the social homes, okay, which is not the same as either the government's definition of affordable or our definition of affordable. And there, collective responsibility, local authorities, housing associations, you could say the CA, but we don't actually do the building ourselves, have not come together to deal with social homes. So that's the thing that was being called out before. And sorry to be a pedant, but on affordable, under the normal definition, we're doing okay. But this is why one of the key elements of the devolution deal, getting our hands on the government's, again, unfortunately named because it's confusing, affordable housing programme money was really important. That money, which has only previously been devolved to the Mayor of London, is actually the stimuli of the social housing building. We have now got our hands on that with Homes England up till spending review and then fully devolved to us. So if you ask me what I think the biggest breakthrough under a single subject was in the devolution deal, was getting our hands on that money. That was the sort of, I will not leave this room till we've got that moment. And what is now happening in terms of the pace is we're seeing quite a good number of housing associations coming to us to say, can we use that money with us to develop more quickly? And the offer actually be there for local authorities to do the same as well if they wish to take this on themselves. Some do, some don't. But that is how we have got to quicken this, to deploy, I think it's 400 million, up to 400 million in up to 2026. So that's a big strike rate, and the big challenge, back to what I said earlier on about the boot being on the other foot, is how we are going to spend that quickly enough. So we've got the critical enabler now got to work with them on individual plans.
I suppose, and with your answer, the issue around modern methods of construction is down to the housing association applying rather than any kind of plan from the CA.
Well, very interesting, very interesting. We have, as I think you will know, I know you know, but other members of the committee will know, we insist on any money that we allocate has an affordable rate of 20%. That's affordable, not social. Now we insist there, no compromise. Okay, we're actually achieving a rate on our developments of 33%. I'm public on that yet, is a reason. Doing very well. We do not yet insist on modern methods of construction, but we do encourage a proportion of homes in any deal to be that, again, back to a theme of the morning, to stimulate the market. But it is a fair question to say, should we move to an insistence around that? Thus far, we have not done so.
If I may just add, we are currently working on guidance, at the very least, which is going to encourage people in that direction. So that will be published, I think, coming to board later on this year, and will be published in due course.
Councillor Burrow?
Thank you. I just want to link the last session, the last thing about green and the current thing about housing. You insist on 20%, you achieve 33% of affordable housing. What is the heat standard that we are demanding, the energy standard that they're demanding? I mean, the government effectively is saying it's grade B, but lots of people do A.
Yeah.
But the future home standard, which is still 2 years away, is better than A, but I can't work out what it is.
Exactly.
What do we actually do as a combined authority of encouraging better than the minimum?
So I will give you my recollection of this, but I actually think we might need to do a little note afterwards just to get this absolutely word perfect. Ed saying, whispering words, he's just said we're publishing. My recollection of it is this, that we are asking for the future home standard now, even though, of course, it is not law until until 2025. So we're trying to be ahead of the curve. But please, if I may, Chair, it's the first time I've had to say this, I do just want to get that absolutely right for you and in no time. That's what I think we're doing.
Councillor Waters.
You said 30, it's the target that you're achieving is 33%. Now, is that statutory in the policy or is that advisory from the combined authority?
So we demand, so we will not do a deal, put it down, unless we achieve 20%.
Yeah.
And the 33 is the outcome of all of the individual investments. So we certainly are not demanding that at all. But obviously, what we try to do on each scheme is negotiate for the very best. But the demand is that 20%, to be really clear. And it's probably worth just 2 sentences more on this. And remember, we changed the definition of affordable here as well. So across the country, affordable is related to the value of property. If property prices go up and salaries don't, that's not much good. But here we define it as a relationship to people's disposable income. And what we talk about is a normal job, a police officer, a nurse, a teacher, how much they would have to spend when they choose to rent or to buy. So it's a more stringent definition of affordable and still achieving that.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to the last couple of areas now. Councillor Marshall, section 114 notices.
Yes.
I will defer to the Birmingham councillors in the room. You know what it might be.
Exactly. So I was wondering if there's any non-financial support available to not just Birmingham, but any authority that is facing or has received a 114 notice. So just to be able to enable them to complete any projects, what support can we offer?
Okay, it's a good question. And you know, I think the first thing I have to say, and I don't want to sound unhelpful, but this is the honest thing to say. Birmingham City Council's finances are its issue, and it is not viable to think the CA can somehow solve that. I know you haven't put it quite like that, but we need to be really robust about this. This is a Birmingham issue, and Birmingham have to solve it. Having said that, there are a couple of things that we can definitely do. And the first, this is a more political point, it might be what you mean by the question. The first is that I hope colleagues in Birmingham would say I've done this appropriately. I can pick up the phone to Michael Gove and give him some advice, and that I have done, and he might choose to reject it, and I told the media what I said, and people can judge me for it. But actually, my own view is the way in which the commissioners have come, and it's very clear about supporting them, still allowing local political decisions with Labour Party political advisors. All of that is wise, and that does reflect the things I said to Michael before. So that might be what you mean by the question, but being honest, it is a role I can play. The second thing is there are a relatively small number of projects where we can actually pick up where Birmingham are not able to do. And I'm only going to mention the one that is public knowledge, has gone fully through our process, because others would be unreasonable. But a really good example of what I'm talking about. Investment Board on Monday, so I can now say it, took a loan proposal to the Hippodrome. You know, everyone knows the Hippodrome is a jewel in our activities here. And we are now making the loan to them as BCC are no longer able to make the loan. And that's a good practical thing we're pleased to do. And there are other things going through the system like that. And then obviously the third, much less tangible thing is, I hope, by the way in which we work together on lots of things, and take all the public transport stuff, for example, that's obviously utterly entwined. We can assist in that, but what we have absolute separation on is our finances, BCC's finances, just as any other local authority.
Thank you.
Well, I do think it's a really important point, because going forward, certainly over the next 2 to 3 years, many authorities within the region are predicted to have financial difficulties. So looking at the non-financial support options that may well be available through the CA at this very early stage. As part of the support to Birmingham, I do think is going to be important going forward, and what might be available.
And there's perhaps another point to be made here about I mean, what's the way out of this? It's the underlying question, isn't it? And just for the sake of absolute clarity, I repeat, BCC's finances are their business. But if you take it wider, Brand Birmingham, how we deal with some of the underlying issues about disadvantage in the city, we've got an incredible role to play there. And obviously we talked earlier on about inward investment. And again, I don't mind telling you this, because I think this is again part of the role. Since the 114 was announced, I have had investors who wanted to invest in Birmingham lining up to say to me, is this the right thing to do? I've had, CEOs of companies in my offices from Singapore, from Australia, and I tell them, yeah, because this is about the City Council's finance, it's not about Brand Birmingham. So there is a very clear non-financial piece going there. And obviously the growth company's role, largely funded by the CA, is to, for all of the 7 authorities, not just Birmingham, is to keep banging that drum.
Got 2 questions, one from Councillor Tennant and one from Councillor McKee, and then we're going to the final question from Councillor Moore before we close.
Thank you. So in your answer to Councillor Marshall, you said that one thing that you can do is pick up the phone to the minister.
Yeah.
And so our vote PFI deal in Birmingham, which is worth 600 million to the city, all we need the Secretary of State to do is sign it off in a very fast approaching deadline. I know a request has gone to you from the council to use your pressure. Have you done that?
So let me be very blunt here. Birmingham Labour Group have got this wrong because they accused me of being complicit in removing this funding from Birmingham.
I wouldn't feel I'm not doing that. I'm just asking.
Okay, I will answer that question, but I think it's fair for me to say you asked that very, very reasonably, but out in the media, different things have already been said. So I said to the council that when the time was right, I stood ready to do that. I have not been told when they want me to do that. The next thing I see is them putting it very bluntly, criticising me in the media for being complicit in the decision, which is just not true. So I will do it when it is put to me in a detailed way and do that. And I have very clearly not been asked to do that at this moment.
I'll move on to final question on this topic from Councillor McKee.
Thanks very much, and you're very capable to defending yourself, Andy, but I wasn't going to go into that, but I think Birmingham Labour Group have missed so many deadlines that the government has set with them to get information in on the PFI deal. It's probably a bit rich to start.
Just jumping, we're not really here to discuss the intricacies of Birmingham's situation. It's more about the overall support to the region in a non-financial manner.
Okay, I think the question that Ria's going to pick up was just coming in on the back of the 114. Each council has its own reason for its 114s. I think there was one council was listed for investing in solar farms. There was another one, Birmingham City Council was listing equal pay and Oracle, etc. in that 114 notice. And the question I was going to ask was, what's the government's view on this? Because up until this stage, they've been quite happy to look at combined authorities, etc. as a sort of an extra government department and quite happily and confident give them the money. And I was just wondering if what we're seeing at the moment from sort of the number of councils that are having financial difficulties, is this is having an effect on the government's willingness to hand out money away from central government and putting it out to sort of local government. That's the right way of
phrasing it. It is actually a really, really brilliant question, Ewan, and I actually don't know the answer. I think, though, you do have to go right back to what we said at the beginning. Why did we get that devolution deal with, at least 1.5 billion in the initial cash, and who knows how much in the single settlements? So they have definitely demonstrated a willingness to let go in that respect, and that came right from the top. The proposal, of course, was signed off by Michael Gove, who's been a brilliant advocate. It was endorsed by the Chancellor and went to the PM. So at the most senior level, they were prepared to devolve. I actually don't know how their confidence has been affected by some of the stories that we've seen. But it is undoubtedly true, back to the very first point, they only chose to devolve to us after they very carefully looked at our capability.
I can add a small amount to that, which is simply to say that since the Section 114 notice, we've had several conversations with government departments at an officer level, and there's been no suggestion that that is a problem. To be more specific, we've had a negotiation this week with Treasury around the single settlement, and again, the matter was discussed explicitly, and again, we got confirmation that Treasury are pressing ahead with those discussions with us on the trailblazer basis that the Mayor's just described.
And I think it's worth me adding one other thing, which isn't quite in your question, that this committee has every right to understand this. And I know Mark has looked at this at ARAC. Obviously, there are a lot of financial relationships between Birmingham and the CA. I think I might get this wrong. I think when the finance director came to the previous board and updated this, there was £189 million of transactions between the two. So what you, as responsible for the CA finances, have got to be interested in, and I'm not being disrespectful in any way to Birmingham colleagues here, is obviously there can't be contagion. And the FD has satisfied herself and reported to the board that that is the case.
Thank you. And our very final section, which is question from Councillor Moore on the transparency of the CA policies and business activity.
I just wanted to explore really about where you see kind of governance and particularly scrutiny actually going in terms of the combined authority. So we've talked a lot about the new devolution deal, more power, more responsibility coming down to the combined authority. You talked a lot earlier on if the PCC was to come in about having the right structures and indeed the right people. And the committee is currently scrutinising sort of 4 of the 5 key pillars of the combined authority. It's absolutely huge. It strikes me that we're going to need a fundamental review of governance, and particularly if the Police and Crime Commissioner function comes in. So just be keen to explore your views on where you see that evolving, but particularly in terms of the scrutiny function.
Of course. So you're right. It's a simple answer. This is why I say back to the phrase earlier on, the boots on the other foot. It really is. First thing, if the PCC function comes in, and it is in, there will be dedicated scrutiny for that area. As Bacon made clear, it is a huge undertaking and will need dedicated piece. And obviously what we've done with Councillor McNicholas for dedicated proper scrutiny in transport also reflects the criticality of that area as well. So I think what that reflects is we know we will have to evolve our scrutiny arrangement as we mature. I'm not sitting on top of a plan at the moment, but I would say that part of the ARAC's job, putting the monkey slightly on Mark's shoulder, is to be looking at the future of this organisation and saying, is everything fit for purpose? And that's when he and I have our conversation. That is the debate. So we know we will have to keep evolving that as it goes. And there's a couple of things there I can say we are definitely either doing or will have to do.
And very finally, from Councillor Bateman.
Just sparked into my head when you gave your answer, Mr. Mayor. The policy and scrutiny obviously will take place. But aligned with that will be an issue that relates to the operation and the expenditure of the West Midlands Combined Authority, because we aren't going to be able to do all that we do with the finance that's available, I suspect, today. So there will have to be more probably made available.
That's right.
Have you got any thoughts in relation to that? And in line with community buy-in and consent from the very people that pay for all this, or pay part of all of this, taxpayer and the council taxpayer, through the precept and the like. That will be, I would thought, Chair, quite an important answer for them to hear And so at that, I think I believe as well, put a full stop and allow the mayor to express his thoughts.
So you're right. So the first thing to say to offer some reassurance is that, again, if the police PCC responsibility does transfer in, it will transfer with a actually considerable budget. But as certainly this is how it's been in Manchester and London and Leeds, has to be ring-fenced. So we can't chip away at what's been set up for the scrutiny in those areas. And no one around this table would suggest that, given the earlier conversation. That will come properly by it. Now, in terms of other scrutiny, we have, and Kathy and Lindsay will confirm this, we have only a little, but steadily added to that as we've gone through, and it comes from our core budget. And we will need to do that when it comes to the single settlement as well. Quite how it will be done yet, whether or not that necessitates a precept has not been answered. But I think we can look at how we've stepped through the last few years to know that that will be required further. And frankly, the precept question, we will leave to the manifestos. So we will see, but we know we will have to do that.
Right, thank you very much. We've now run out of time. We're just slightly over, so we've just done, I think, quite well really today. So Mayor, if there's any closing comments from yourself?
I would just make one comment. You've chaired it brilliantly. You've got through everything with 1 minute over, so thank you. And I hope I do my very best to answer honestly. And thank you for the questions, for some really stimulating thoughts, actually. So thank you very much.
Thank you. If we can have the couple of written briefings, please, that you've said.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Okay, folks, so that brings us to the end of the mayoral Q&A. What I would ask is if people just want to grab a quick drink, we'll come back together for another 10 or 15 minutes just to have a discussion on anything that we would like to bring attention to the board, or if there is anything else following the questions that we've heard answered to that you want to follow up in writing. So if we can come back together. Nigel looks like he's got a dash off. If people have got a dash off, that's fine. But if we could just grab 10 minutes after in a few minutes, that would be really helpful.